You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Thank you for joining me here today on this Weight Loss and Wellness Wednesday. We're going to talk about the foods that wreck your metabolism. So one of the things that I like to talk about in my functional medicine practice is that it's not about the calories that you eat, but the quality of those calories. And that's because many of the foods that I'm going to mention today are actually very low calorie. And some of them are actually marketed as good for you or alternatives to a higher calorie snack or a higher calorie meal. But what I want to do today is really kind of demystify why there are good foods and bad foods. Like, I know there's a lot of people out there right now who don't want to demonize certain foods, who don't want to call them cheat meals or those specific things. But I want to tell you that it doesn't really mean all things in moderation. Like some of the things I'm going to talk about today, really there is no such thing as moderation, because every time you put these foods into your body, you are creating inflammation, you're creating mood-based disturbances, neurological-based issues, inflammation, certain gut-based imbalances. They are things that you do not want, and certainly your children do not want either. So that's why I don't always believe in all things in moderation. Sure, like I'm someone who likes to have a cheat meal and likes to have certain foods, even though I know that they're not healthy for me. But, what does moderation mean? That means me doing it basically once a week of, a dessert or food that I want, but it's not every day. Like moderation for a lot of people, like, oh, well, I'm just going to have this one little thing every day. I'll tell you right now, that one little thing every day does add up. And if you're not reaching your goals, whether it's wellness-based or, you have joint pain or inflammation or skin issues or any weight loss-based issues, there's a reason why. And so my highest recommendation right now is really to look at this list and understand that there are certain foods, even low calorie or zero calorie, which I'm going to talk about first, that actually do a number on your metabolism and overall health. Because as we always talk about here on the Cabral Concept, you losing weight, you transforming your body in general is not about calories in, calories out. That's just very basic. But what we're talking about is getting the body balanced. When the body is balanced, it's going to be healthy. It's not going to be overweight, because an overweight body is a sign that you are not balanced, right? I mean, in order to be truly healthy, it shows from every area of your life. You have good skin, right? You have vibrant energy, a lot of vitality. Your weight is maintained for your perfect weight, not your friend's perfect weight, not your mother's, not your father's, not your siblings, but your perfect weight, which doesn't mean you need to be stick thin, or it doesn't mean that you need to have huge muscles or any of those things. It's perfect for you. That's really what we're talking about. So let's get into our first one today. I've got 5 foods, 5 main food groups, we'll even call them, because I wouldn't just say it's individual foods, but 5 food groups that are really do a number on your metabolism. That means slow your metabolism from the inside out without you really knowing it. So the first one is artificial sweeteners. I know you've heard about artificial sweeteners before, but let's get a little deeper on this, meaning that the Diet Cokes, the soft drinks, any artificial sweeteners, even with aspartame or with Splenda or MSG, any of those things. Here's how we get deeper on this, okay? Yes, they can actually mimic sugar, which means they can spike your blood sugar, believe it or not. Even though they have maybe 0 calorie, they can still spike the blood sugar because you can't fool your body, and they're still going to cause food cravings because they're going to still give you that craving inside your body. Your body says, well, okay, there's the sweet taste that I'm used to with sugar, but I didn't get any of the minerals or any of the actual glucose along with it, which can set you up for a rebound effect that can make you even hungrier a half hour, an hour after eating these foods. One of those common things we see is when people eat Chinese food. They talk about that all the time. It's one of those things where, like, why am I hungry an hour and a half after eating Chinese food? One of the reasons sometimes there is MSG, sometimes there is some artificial sweetener added to that, or it's just a higher glycemic meal as well. That's just one of the reasons, okay? But here's some much deeper reasons. Artificial sweeteners, and I've done this before. I've done whole podcasts on just type in artificial sweetener. at stephencabral.com/podcast, and you'll see my previous shows on this. But with artificial sweeteners, I talked about all the ones that I don't like for your body. So here's the thing. When you use something like Splenda or aspartame, they actually change, not in a good way, your gut flora or the good gut bacteria. And especially with Splenda, with that chlorine molecule attached to it, what's happening is you're killing off some of the good gut bacteria or probiotics. So that's really, really important. It doesn't mean just supplement with more probiotics. What it means is remove those fake sweeteners from your diet. Okay, really, really important. Of course, if you've listened to my previous shows, you know that those artificial sweeteners like the aspartame, especially in children, adults as well, but especially in children, can cause moodiness, learning disabilities, neurological disorders, especially anything with food dyes. I mean, whole studies have been done on this with ADD, ADHD, autism. It exacerbates the condition. So I can't recommend to you enough, get rid of these artificial sweeteners. I don't care that they're 0 calories. They're worse for you than regular sugar. And if you need an alternative, I've said before, raw honey, as long as you don't have any real histamine issues or gut-based issues right now, you'll correct those. If you haven't, make sure you correct them. Maple syrup. And in terms of like a 0 calorie or lower calorie one, I'm good with stevia. Not for everyone, but for most people. And that's because of its actual beneficial properties that it can have and its non-blood sugar spiking effects. And for some people, monk fruit or lohan would be okay as well. Those last two aren't something that I typically add in, but I'm not as much against those. Okay, so number 2 is going to be alcohol and sugar alcohols. Now, sugar alcohols won't contain the actual like ethanol alcohol or the alcohol that you would drink in, whether it's wine, a beer, or it's some type of hard alcohol. But the sugar alcohols, let's talk about those first. Sugar alcohols are added to protein bars and other processed foods as a sweetener. And they're done because they don't have to be added to the so-called net carbs because they're a different calorie quantity. They're actually just a little above 6. And what's interesting, though, is although they don't always cause a spike in blood sugar, they do cause gut-based disturbances. And that to me is just as bad. Like, I don't want that. I don't want other nutrients to miss their absorption path because you added in sugar alcohols or things that can cause cramping and bloating and fermentation. You know, so I work with a lot of people with SIBO and Crohn's and colitis and IBS and Candida, and we certainly don't want sugar alcohols in those people's diets, and I don't want them in healthy people's gut bacteria as well. So here's the other thing with alcohol. When you're drinking that and you're doing it because you want to have a good time with friends and family and all those things, sure, I get it. Maybe once a week, maybe every once a month, or, you know, not too often. Think of it that way. Why? Well, alcohol does increase gut permeability. So in susceptible people, it can actually widen the gaps in the lamina propria, which is just the gut wall, that then allows for bacteria or candida or proteins to make their way through that gut wall. And when that happens, it can start to create an inflammation and actually immune-based response, immune-based cascade, which a lot of times we like to call an autoimmune-based disorder, when really it's not an autoimmune-based disorder. It's a body immune system trying to keep up with the havoc that is now caused in the body from this increased permeability, where when we eat foods, those foods, not properly and fully digested, get moved through the gut wall too quickly or improperly by not fully breaking down those amino acid chains. So we won't get into that too much today, but again, if you just type in leaky gut into stephencabral.com/podcast, always go back to those previous podcasts. You'll see in-depth shows on those as well. So because it weakens the gut, because it weakens digestion, because it creates inflammation, because it really slows your body's own detoxification, puts an extra burden on the liver and kidneys as well. That's why I can't recommend drinking a lot of alcohol. Now, again, I understand we're in the real world. You're still going to have alcohol sometimes, but let's just not make it an every night type of thing. Okay. Number 3 is processed grains. Processed grains. Why do I have an issue with those? Well, processed grains take a whole grain, they refine it down, and now it allows for that blood sugar spike. Why do we keep talking about blood sugar spikes in terms of your metabolism? Well, if you spike your blood sugar goes up. That means your body is essentially going to shut down fat burning to a greater extent. Your body's very happy to start using sugar in your bloodstream as a fuel source instead of oxidizing body fat. But also keep in mind that blood sugar can start to throw off hormones such as estrogen, such as cortisol, such as other factors as well. But my bigger thing is this, is that what we're really doing is we're then making the pancreas work harder. The pancreas is then going to have to secrete more insulin, and the insulin then is going to have to go into that bloodstream and pull the sugar into the cells. That's the basis basically of how things work. So, and that takes time. For some people it's 60 minutes. For other people it's 3 to 5 hours. And so if we're having processed grains, we're getting that blood sugar spike, which we certainly do not want. Now, an ectomorph, yes, they might be able to deal better with it, but there's still not a reason to necessarily have processed grains. Now, I'm not including whole grains in this. Whole grains would be something like oatmeal or buckwheat or quinoa or millet, one of those things, which is a true whole grain that a lot of people do really well with. Now, some people don't. I'm not going to deny that. And for everyone in my practice who has any type of autoimmune-based issue or dis-ease of any type, we actually eliminate all grains from the diet for 21 days. And the reason we do that is because sometimes it's lectin issues, sometimes it's the grains themselves. I mean, there's so many different reasons why. Meaning, like, if you haven't run a food sensitivity to your grains, meaning the IgG food sensitivity test, we'll link that up today. That's something I do highly recommend. So if you go to StephenCabral.com/656, I'll link up today the food sensitivity test where you can run your food sensitivities and actually check for yourself to see if you're sensitive to gliadin or wheat or any of these grains that we spoke about as well. So that's a big one. And of course, I do eliminate that for everyone for 21 days. And then we do a food reintroduction after that 21-day period, as long as you weren't sensitive on your food sensitivity test. Another thing about this is that when you process a grain, typically then you're adding it to something like a breading or a wheat or something like that, and you add oils and fats to it. What happens now is we raise the levels of omega-6s. This is something that almost no one talks about. Omega-6s do a couple things, okay? So omega-6s are inflammatory, especially when they come from a processed food. Now, we get natural omega-6s from some animal-based products, and we get them from nuts and things like that. But we get unnatural forms of omega-6 in a very large quantity in processed foods, especially fried foods. And those fried foods typically have a breading or a coating or something like that on them as well from that processed grain. Well, what happens here is it really spikes inflammation. That affects the arteries. That affects everything. Of course, it's systemic, which means it's your entire body. It affects the brain as well, your thinking, migraines, all of that. But there's an even bigger thing. It does that through an inflammatory expression of something called prostaglandins. And that's why when people use things like daily omega-3 or omega-3 support or pure omega or one of those things, and they're getting the omega-3s, that they're able to offset these prostaglandins. They're able to offset allergies. They're able to offset the rheumatoid arthritis, the things that are caused by the increase in prostaglandins. Well, here's the thing. If we look at food as medicine in the first place, and we say, sure, use your omega-3s, but why don't we go back and find out maybe through our diet, we cause this spike in omega-6s. So again, the omega-3 test, I'm going to link that up today as well. I'll tell you, I mentioned a few times now, the omega-3 test is one of those hidden tests that not a lot of doctors run. Some do. I have to give credit. A lot of functional medicine doctors and practitioners do run the omega-3 test, but it is telling. Like, that is a telling test for what the inside of your cardiovascular system, your arteries look like in terms of inflammation and your overall inflamed state. The lower that number, the better. I mean, I try to reach for a 3-to-1 from omega-6s to omega-3s with every person in my private practice. So big advocate of that, and there's obviously a reason why. So number four, this is a favorite of mine to talk about because nobody likes to hear it. So I have to be the bearer of bad news. But dairy, cow's milk dairy, especially the stuff that you find in your grocery food store or, your local convenience store, is just, it's horrible for the overall health of your body. I mean, I even think it's worse than just having like processed wheat or grain. I really believe that. And that's because there's so many hormones in cow's milk dairy. Those cows are pumped full of the grains. So now you can see how you're getting the omega-6s actually from the grains. They're pumped full of, meaning like their feed is full of corn. It's full of soy. It's full of wheat. It's full of all these unnatural products that they give to an animal that's supposed to eat grass and just graze on greenery in the fields. And they put that in their diet. And people wonder why they're sick, why they're inflamed, and why that meat is just loaded with omega-6s. Plus, that meat is high, much higher levels than we would expect from a normal grass-fed or green-fed pastured cow. And that comes from, obviously, their feed. So now we're getting meat that's like a 20-to-1 from omega-6s to omega-3s. Really inflammatory, horrible for the body. But then, of course, the dairy that's produced as well also is high in estrogen. Okay, it's higher in estrogen. It's higher in IGF-1. All of these things have been shown to increase risk for cancer, increase risk for autoimmune-based disease. Why? Well, keep in mind that, again, I have lots of clinical data backing this up. But the number one food sensitivity on the IgG food test right now that I've seen in my practice over and over and over for the past half decade since I've been tracking myself is dairy, is cow's milk, specifically casein. And remember, there's no way to get it right away from the casein. You could say, oh, well, I do lactose milk. Doesn't matter. If your dairy product contains protein in it, which it does, you can't get really a protein-free dairy. Casein represents 80% of all of that dairy, whey protein being the 20% that isn't as negative as this casein. And it's funny how they market casein as this health food protein drink. And you know why they do that, or maybe you don't, because it's very deceptive marketing. The reason why they market casein as this very healthy thing is because it is slower released in the body. That doesn't mean it's a good thing, but it's a marketing tactic, and it's extremely cheap. If 80% of all the protein comes from casein, and you're throwing that away when you're making whey protein, you can see like, well, what are we supposed to do with the 80% of the other protein? We need to figure out a way to market this. And that's what marketing companies do. Not health companies, not functional medicine, practitioners, but people out there just looking to make money off nutritional supplements. That's the bottom line. I'm a believer in nutritional supplements, but I'm not a believer in the only reason you produce a nutritional supplement is to make money. I think that should be the last reason. The reason that you make money on nutritional supplements is that you can provide a great service to people, help them get well, and continue to have your company thrive so that you can produce better products than anyone else. But again, that's my personal philosophy and not always shared by everyone for sure in the industry. So many issues. Dairy also causes digestive issues, causes so much inflammation in the gut, and cause permeability-based issues. And it's also robs your body of more calcium than it could ever get from the milk itself. Now, you could use a nut milk, such as an almond milk, coconut milk, macadamia nut milk, Brazil nut milk, any type of nut milk that you would like. And you can also get more calcium from that than you would get actually from dairy. So please don't believe the hype that you need to drink cow's milk in order to get your calcium. That is completely false. Okay, number 5. Number 5 is low-calorie snack packs. This is going to be the last one that I chat about today. Why low-calorie snack packs? Well, I've talked about this maybe like 500 episodes ago, really long time ago on the Cabral concept. Okay, low-calorie snack packs destroy your metabolism just like the previous 4. And the reason why they do that is low-calorie snack packs, yes, they're 100 calories or less. I get that. Great marketing again, right? All of these things are backed by great marketing, right? Artificial sweeteners, 0 calories, right? Alcohol, oh, well, it's good for you and it helps your heart. And no, none of that is true. Sugar alcohol doesn't spike blood sugar. Processed grains or wheat, those types of things. What goes into these low-calorie snack packs? Eat your dairy. It's good for your bones. It's good for all of those things. Again, not true, right? Not true. All of these things slow metabolism because of how they affect our blood sugar, which affects our hormones, how they affect our digestive system. We're not able to absorb all the nutrients that our body needs. What happens when you can't absorb the nutrients that your body needs? Well, it gets robbed of your vitamins and minerals, which means your body is more likely to hold on to more calories in order to try to store the nutrients that it does need. Again, putting on body fat is always a protective measure by the body, like 100% of the time, without a doubt. And one thing I didn't mention about dairy is that it's a great calorie storing food. It's a pro-kapha food. So in Ayurvedic medicine, the kapha body type, which is the endomorph, that's the body type that basically puts on the number one food that they should never eat is dairy. It's funny, never eat dairy, especially cold dairy, which is, of course, what we're given in our culture for the most part. It's always refrigerated. Now, why do they say that for the kapha? Well, the kapha body type, the endomorph body type, builds up more mucus, and dairy is one of the best anabolic foods. Again, Ayurvedic medicine is just the most beautiful form of medicine, most complete form of medicine in the world. Yes, it's very in-depth. You can't master it in a year studying it, but you have your whole life to study it. It's worth it. And so I had to just mention one more thing in this. So when I was over at a couple clinics and we were helping people through panchakama and we wanted to remove excess kapha from the body, I'm not going to go through the whole treatment because it will turn you off. People drank this cold milk and it brought all the mucus to the stomach, and then they actually had to throw it up. It's a very, very intense treatment, which they don't do here in the US, but highly effective at just getting rid of all this mucus and all this congestion. But then when we put people on an anti-kapha diet, they could not get any dairy. They were supposed to stay away from any dairy because it's such an anabolic food and it builds the body up. And we know this, right? We know this to be inherently true because what do baby calves drink, right? They drink milk. What do babies drink? They drink milk. Why? Very high in hormones, very high in IGF-1 levels, which is an anabolic hormone that basically builds the body up. So if you're not looking to build your body up, if you're looking to actually lose the body fat, well, of course, that makes zero sense. Now, back to the snack packs. I like to go on little tangents there. Back to the snack packs. It's highly processed, okay? So it's processed grains. It's not satiating at all. So you're going to be hungrier an hour or so later anyways, because not only is it not satiating because it gets digested so quickly, but it spikes your blood sugar levels. That means it brings you high and then it drops you down even lower than when you started with your blood sugar. And when that happens, your body's then craving more sugar. It's craving more simple carbs so that it can get its energy back and get its blood sugar back up to level. And the problem is too, those snack packs, they contain no real minerals, no natural vitamins and minerals. And what happens there is that you can't fool your body. When you give it calories, when you give it empty calories, that's why we call it empty calories, because there's no minerals, there's no micronutrients. Yes, there's macros, there's carbs, proteins, and fat, but there's no micros, there's no vitamin, there's no B6, B12, folate, thiamine. There's none of those, right? And there's no calcium, magnesium, potassium, zinc, selenium, phosphorus. There's none of those minerals really in depth. So what happens is the body's like, whoa, well, we got all the sugar. We need some minerals to be able to utilize it. So then it looks for more food. Again, you can't fool the body. You can't. So there's not going to be all these foods that we're synthetically making in a lab. I'm just going to give you the short story right here. Don't fall for it. Don't go for them. Any synthetic man-made food like the fake meats, the fake vegetables, remember, you can't replicate nature. That's what I'm trying to say. So, of course, go back to my previous shows, especially that show that I did, which ended up being an extremely, extremely popular show, which was called, I wish I could find it here, it was The Foundation of All Diets. Let's see if I can find that right now. Okay, so it was episode 637, StephenCabral.com/637. If you didn't check that out on how to eat right, how to actually fix the metabolism, tune into that show. It's called Use This as the Foundation for All Diets. So even if you're keto, paleo, primal, vegan, vegetarian, any other type of diet plan that you follow, use that as the foundation. And then check out episode 648, StephenCabral.com/648. And that's the 10 practical rules to eating and getting well. That was one of my favorite shows. That's the foundation. That's the show to share with friends, to really let them know, like, hey, this is how to start to eat well. This is how to start to get healthier. Really, I enjoyed that show. And I actually did it because I want to give that also to everyone that I work with in my practice. I want to say, like, hey, here's the foundation. Here's where to start. And I think everyone should have that information. So hopefully today's show helped. The foods that wreck your metabolism, they certainly do. And remember, I know that you're going to have some of these in the course of your month, let's say, of eating. But just remember, keep them as a cheat meal once a week, once every couple weeks, once a month, and then they won't have as great of an effect on your metabolism. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into another Cabral Concept. I appreciate each and every one of your listens, and please do feel free to share this show with anyone it could help. Are you ready to heal yourself and then go on to heal others? If so, the Integrative Health Practitioner Institute can help you discover proven functional medicine protocols that blend the best of 7 different healing disciplines from around the world. I personally share with you the exact handouts and protocols I use in my private practice that enable people to get well, lose the weight, and live longer, stronger. I want to pass this information on to the next generation of health coaches, and that is exactly why I created IHP. We are the future of the health coaching industry, and the skills and knowledge you will learn will make you an in-demand certified health coach anywhere in the world. Although we have many medical professionals taking the IHP certifications, no experience is necessary, and half our members have no previous health certifications. At the Integrative Health Practitioner Institute, our motto is a health coach in every home. Our goal is that you take this knowledge and then share it with family, friends, loved ones, your community, or in a practice where you create a career you love and can be proud of. The global IHP community is filled with some of the most kind and caring people in the world, and we can't wait to welcome you into our world soon. For more information or to set up a discovery call with one of our IHP Health Coach graduates, simply head over to integrativehealthpractitioner.org.